This is Sherry, and this is Real Girl Talk Podcast Radio Show, the podcast for women who want to live an empowered, intentional life. I will be giving you my best tips in business, lifestyle, as well as emotional and spiritual healing, bringing you interesting guests and giving you a weekly dose of inspiration, and always committed to keeping it real. Now let's dive in. I am so grateful that you're here. Welcome back to Real Girl Talk. I'm your host, Sherry. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to start off with highlighting the reviewer of the week. She says, it was such a pleasure to be a guest on your show. Thank you for helping me get justice for my son, Blake. And that came from Justice for Blake. And I love this lady. She was a guest on my show. She is one of the angel moms fighting in Washington, D.C. to get justice for her son that was killed while he was in Louisiana, traveling by someone that was illegal in our country. And I'm saddened for her, and it was a pleasure to have her on my show. So thank you so much for that review. And guys, make sure you always jump over and leave me a review on iTunes or anywhere that you listen to podcasts, because it helps so much in the ratings. And I really want to spread just podcast love for everyone that is not familiar with podcasts and those that love podcasts. Thank you. And today, as always, I am bringing you an amazing guest. And I really love to keep it real. I love real people, real stories, and I bring them to inspire you, educate you, and encourage you. And today I am bringing you, and listen to this name, Sunshine Shen. I mean, really, that is a beautiful name. She moved here from China to the U.S. as a young girl. She started her career in modeling, and she began working for Playboy as a painted lady. She has been on multiple magazine covers, and recently FHM and Maxim. Welcome to the show, Sunshine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I love your name because you can't say it without a smile on your face, right?
It's definitely a mouthful. So.
I love it. And, just reading your story, we're going to dive right in here, because
sure.
I read your background that you worked for Playboy as a painted lady. You got to help me out.
Yeah.
So what is a painted lady that works for Playboy?
Sure. So I originally moved over from Los Angeles, from Florida, and being at the mansion have always been kind of like my dream. And when I first met Half at one of his Halloween parties, he invited me to some of his like weekend events, which are like private closed-off events.
Right.
And right there, I kind of got to know his family circle. And it was such a blessing getting to know them, honestly. Such great people. And over the years, he just kind of selects, I believe it's 12 girls every 2 years, 12 playmates or even Playboy bunnies, because at the time I was just doing spreads for them, not covers.
Right.
And he selected me to be one of his painted ladies. And basically what we do is we get painted body paint. The process takes about like 8 hours, I want to say.
Wow.
Yeah, it's definitely, and you can't really sit down because it will get kind of like rubbed off, and they put like glitter and all this stuff on you. So actually when the glitter falls away, it actually hurts a little because they're putting super glue on, It was a kind of a painful process, and I didn't know, you see it from the outside and you don't really think about the details. So during the parties, so we basically go around and say hi to the party guests and take photos with them. I really kind of represent Hugh Hefner himself at his parties, since he's not really able to talk to everyone, especially as he was coming towards his final, time on this earth. So it was our job to make the guests feel welcome during our parties.
Wow. Okay. So I have to ask you a question here. So I'm trying to envision me being really still for 8 hours and letting someone paint my body. Did you have nothing on at all and you're painted, or do you have something?
Yeah. No, so we basically have like absolutely nothing on.
Ah,
And we all basically, I would say we probably got to the mansion the day of the party, at around 10 a.m. And it was really important that we're there on time, because after a certain time they kind of like stop letting us in, and have this kind of like a stickler about being on time, for us being on time anyway.
right.
So we were there from 10 a.m. until I want to say 9 p.m. and the party starts about 9:30, 10 p.m. and we're standing pretty much the entire time, and it's kind of like a converted belt process. And we kind of like we get to decide which, essentially costume or body paint that we want, and which group, like we figure out which group that we want to be in because they split us in groups of four. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's interesting.
So after you did that, did you ever go on to work for Playboy as far as in the magazines, or were you just working in that for him at his parties and being more of a hostess?
Yeah, so during the time that I participated in the hosting of the parties, I was published in the spreads. I was published in the magazine, but only spreads. And shortly after he passed away, I was given the opportunity to take a cover for Playboy last year in Australia. I believe it's May. Yeah, and then after I did FHM as well. So
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that's really
yeah,
cool because,
yeah.
I've
Thank you.
read stories in the past about Hugh Hefner and actually know
Mm,
a young lady. Her name's Amber Campisi. I don't know if you know her, but
okay.
she actually worked for Hugh Hefner. She was in Playboy. She's a friend of mine in Dallas, and I love her. She's just a
Mm,
sweetheart, and I
wonderful.
thought a lot about him. Do you know Amber by chance?
I don't think so, but you know
Yeah,
what? I'm sure I've came across her. There's just
yeah,
so many of us at the mansion,
I'm
so there's
sure.
a lot of confusion as it is. So we're not really learning everyone's names, and plus
Right.
I'm pretty bad with names and faces.
I'm sure at those parties it's very organized chaos. So it's
Yeah,
actually it
more
goes,
so chaos, I would
yeah,
say.
organized chaos, so everything goes smoothly. Because I know the
Yeah,
rumor has it that Hugh Hefner was a stickler for making sure everything ran smoothly and everyone was on time, and
a
so
100%.
probably why he was so successful, because he was such an organized businessman, and he had a good
Yes,
head on his shoulders, and he knew what he wanted. Now, I want to
right.
jump into something else with you, because I know that you have gone through some personal hardships,
Mm-hmm.
and you have taken those personal hardships and you are transitioning into other parts of your life, or stepping into a new chapter, I guess I would say. So
Mm-hmm.
take us through some of the stories. You've moved over here as a young girl, and you're working for Hugh Hefner, and you're in the modeling industry, and take us from
Mm-hmm.
there. And what challenges have you been through that have made you a better person?
Um, you know what? I would say for me, just kind of growing up, my mother, she's Russian and my father's Chinese. So
Mm,
I was kind of influenced by a very strong female presence. And my father, I suppose he, if I may be blunt, I definitely think he was kind of like the more submissive, counterpart in their marriage. So my mom have always been very controlling, very hands on about the way she kind of like, she was very controlling. Essentially,
right.
she's very the dominant, parent, and oftentimes because she was career wise very successful, um, she played both roles. She was the father and the mother.
Mm,
So eventually, it did cause a divorce between my parents, of course. So at the age of 16, I lived with my mom only, and she really became like the CEO of my life.
mm.
And so I would say my biggest challenge in my life, that I eventually had to overcome and conquer, would be kind of how to stand up for myself, and instead of kind of being too busy kind of catering and worrying about other people and start really showing myself some real self-love. Not so much selfishness, but move out of the mentality that I'm not important or not good enough for me to show myself love and attention, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I know that you're always looking for, a higher meaning and a purpose for why things happen the
Sure,
way they do. And, I think
absolutely.
that's great that you have that realization. But I wanted to ask you, when you came over and you started modeling and to get into Playboy,
Mm,
that's huge. And you
right,
really have to be self-assured with yourself to model for Playboy because you obviously
sure,
don't have any clothes on, and you really
right.
have to be really self-confident. So with being you that your mother was the way she was, what was her role in all of that?
You know what? I don't think she knows until this day.
What?
After, yeah, she does not know. I don't think anyone really have told her. My family does know, but more so on my father's side. She's just not very open-minded. She was a nuclear engineer, so you can imagine what her reaction might be. She
Right.
moved away when she left the country when I was 17. And I've been kind of on my own ever since. And unfortunately, we kind of lost touch. She went through some, I want to say maybe mental struggles. Her job eventually kind of failed her, and she went through a very hard time, and it created like a lot of tension between our like mother and daughter, relationship. And so we just kind of decided to essentially walk our separate ways. And as much as I loved her, I think it's healthier for us both. So till this day, I don't think she knows, but my father does know, and he's actually surprisingly very supportive.
That's
So
wonderful that he's supportive. And you touched my heart a
yeah.
little bit when you said that your mom moved away at 17 and you've kind of been on your own
Hmm.
because, you know, that's hard for me to really think
Right.
about because my mother has been such an active role model in my
Right.
life. And,
Sure.
granted, we are the opposite. My mother
Hmm.
was a stay-at-home mom and she
Right.
worked a little outside the home, but I think it was just out of boredom when we got older. It was not
Right.
that she
Right.
had
Right.
to. And so when I was
Hmm.
growing up, she was cooking and cleaning and taking care of three children and her
Right.
husband. And I am just the opposite, where I have been working since I
Right.
was 17 years old. And, I went to
Hmm.
nursing school and then straight into nursing
Right.
and then to the corporate
That's
industry,
wonderful.
and then just on
Hmm.
and on. So we're kind of opposite in there, but she's always been a huge support system as far as my cheerleader, you know? And so
Right. Right.
I don't know how that would feel. I mean, you've obviously done very well for yourself and you have a supportive father, but tell me a little bit about that mother, being without that mother. You
Sure.
said it was healthier. Is that something that you want to sustain, or do you feel like if there's a time in a young woman's life that if it's a healthier situation, just because it's your mother,
Mhm.
basically, you don't have to stay in that relationship? Because I know other people in the same situation where they have decided their mother was not the best thing for them. And I
Sure.
don't, I don't know how I would deal with that. So, for some of the listeners that are struggling with that,
Mhm.
what kind of tips can you give someone that has that estranged relationship from the mother role model and
Mhm.
figure and their actual biological mother in their life?
Sure. For me, because there's been, some physical distance between me and my mother at a very young age. So my parents actually came to the States first. She was working for the International Laboratory over in Houston. So when they recruited her, I think I was about like 2 or 3. And so, interesting enough, it was actually my first conscious memory of my parents leaving and my grandmother raised me. So at a very young age, when you deal with that as you're coming to, um, subconscious memory, it really kind of reprograms your brain. And it's just been how it is throughout my whole life. I taught myself at a very, very young age to be independent. And even during the time that I lived with my, cousins and, my family in China, I always kind of been the black sheep. Always been very independent. I always been a little quiet. I'm more so the observer. I didn't really participate in a lot of like family functions. I was just kind of there. So, I just kind of, at a young age, I'm a sponge for other people's like experiences. If that makes sense. And it wasn't until I moved over to the States at the age of 8 that I pretty much, for the first time, meeting my parents. So already at that age, I feel like I was already in a mindset, like I understand these are my biological parents, but mentally and emotionally, we just never really made that connection. Because my mom, she was very successful in what she did, and highly intelligent. In a way, I guess I always sort of admired her. She was my idol versus, my mother, right? And she's a strong advocate on, hey, a woman needs to stand alone. She needs to be independent. But in a way that kind of like backfired on her marriage when the divorce happened. So, I have an interesting and different dynamic with my mom. It's definitely not so much emotional, but, more she wanted to be a solid support system versus like a nurture. So it's definitely a little different.
Yeah, no, I completely understand what you're saying, because I see that in some other people that I have met and have had in my life, that they too have had those struggles. And I always find it interesting that, you can take someone that did not have the parental support and fan base, I guess I should say, for
Yes.
a particular child, and you can compare it sometimes to someone that actually did, and they're both very
Right.
successful. So you wonder sometimes, is it that person? Is it something that's just embedded in them and they've trained themselves to be able to
Right.
stand up? Because, I know that my husband, for instance, his father worked all the time, his mother worked all the time, and he was a big athlete, very, very successful athlete. And he didn't have that parental support. And he feels like he probably could have gone further in his athletic career had he had the support.
Right.
But then he looks at it like, I think it was just that I just didn't motivate myself. And, I know that there's athletes that are very successful in the NFL that didn't even have a male role model in their life. And they end up being very successful. So that's interesting, your dynamic with your mom, and then just the field that you went into with the modeling and all of that, just it's great that you were able to do that and sustain yourself at such a young age to know what you wanted to do. So tell me a little bit about some of your future plans. I know that you are very encouraged about empowering other people, and tell me about the spiritual teacher in you.
Yeah. So recently, well, I want to say for the last couple years, I really been trying to find myself in a way, and my path to self-discovery, kind of led me down this path to enlightenment. I studied, lots of, books, watched a lot of documentaries, and really took up such a huge interest in metaphysical knowledge. And it really has helped me kind of essentially discover and realize, my true purpose, get in touch with what we call the higher self.
Right.
And it completely changed, uprooted, the way that my brain, my mind was programmed for so long. And I was able to essentially close out a lot of the childhood wounds, and which we all have them. They're just different for everyone. That we, essentially, it creates a lot of pain, a lot of subconscious triggers that determines our behavior today, even as adults. And when you essentially go towards the path of self-realization, you're able to unlock these memories from your subconscious, maybe some emotions that you're trying to suppress consciously,
Right.
and kind of really deal with that in a healthy manner so you can end those cycles of pain and sorrow. And a lot of people go into depression, they don't know why. And that is like the root of that. So,
Right. So take us into that just a little bit, because I want to kind of deep
mhm,
dive into, you said you read a lot of books and you write, and a lot of people do that, but they still can't get to that self-awareness and
sure.
self-realization you talked about. So take us on that just a little bit. How would someone that has needs to heal, it could be a childhood wound, it could be something that's more recent
Mhm,
in a few years, maybe it's a divorce or a death of a loved
mhm,
one or something like that. So how would someone start to basically rebloom themselves?
mhm. I want to say the biggest and most important thing is for us to always be grateful. Gratitude really is everything. It lays the foundation of, you know, essentially a perspective. It can really alter the way that we're currently viewing a situation if you feel like your mindset isn't so positive right now for whatever reason. Gratitude is so important. Being grateful for the smallest things. Essentially, you wake up in the morning, you say, well, one, I'm alive, and
Mm.
two, in my bed, I have a roof over my head, no matter how small or where it is. And just be appreciative for anything like running water, electricity, and you think about all the people that almost the miracle of humankind, of mankind, for building these like technology and making our life so easy. So it's like giving thanks to the collective humankind, and and most importantly ourselves and our lives, and everything essentially the universe have blessed us with, no matter how basic or mundane it is to other people. It's really how we look at our own situation.
Right, because I think that's just typical things that we take for granted every day sometimes, is just the
Hmm.
simple structures and love and people that we have around us. So
Right.
we're grateful. Your biggest tip is being grateful. Now, at
Hmm.
once we realize the gratitude, and we feel blessed and we know that we have wonderful things in our life,
Hmm.
where do we go with that? In finding our
So
where do we go?
sure. So the biggest thing about gratitude is that it's something that we really have to work on every day. So when you wake up in the morning, I used to run through, lists of small things that I'm so grateful for, and all the people. And I did that, I wouldn't say every day for a year, to really get into the mindset of gratitude. I think we, often tell other people or ourselves, I do appreciate it. I'm just so thankful, but we don't actually mean it. You want to feel that sense of gratitude in your heart. And that in itself really kickstart this whole self-realization process. And once you have that down, you definitely want to open your mind to a lot of, third-party knowledge, people who have a lot of wisdom. So the books that it really made me want to trigger my interest in this realm would have to be The Secret. And I hear a lot of people and they say, "Oh, it's such an amazing book. I really want to learn to manifest. I want a better life." But they kind of chase after the materialistic gains.
Right.
Um, and which is like, I guess it's a hook, right? They've kind of positioned it that way. But if you really dig deeper into the knowledge side of things, it's almost like, for me, it was like, well, how are they able to reprogram their mind and energy to attract or manifest only their positive dreams into reality?
Mm.
So it really comes with a lot of like ton of positive thinking, no matter what, right? And often, you mentioned hardships in life. You possibly you go through a divorce, a breakup, whatever it is. You get fired from your job, and we fall into these pits of depression. We feel like there's something wrong with us. It has to be us. That has to be me. And often I feel like it's easier for women to think that way, versus kind of like blaming other people. I think as females, we do take accountability and responsibility almost like too much. So when these negative things tend to happen to us, we blame ourselves, and that is the biggest thing that we have to move away from as women. And being able to see the positive when there is none, right? It seems like everything in our lives is falling apart, but the true belief needs to be at your core. You believe that, there's a reason for everything that's happening. Nothing's an accident. So if you, get fired from your job, guess what? That's going to put you on the right path of finding a better one. And, if you go through a divorce, whatever lesson that you need to learn, you have to be open to that experience and kind of let the emotion ride the waves of your emotions. Don't bottle yourself up. Don't not express yourself. If you're angry, express yourself. If you're sad, purge, cleanse, and it's okay to do all those things. And after you kind of pick yourself up emotionally, your world would essentially, you open yourself up to new and better experiences and whatever that is. So.
Right. And I completely agree. And, that's one thing that I do. You talked about, when you wake up and how important it is to have a morning routine. I'm a true believer in however you start your day is how your day will end. And because
100%.
a lot of times we get up and we spill coffee on ourselves, or, the dog vomits in the middle of the den, or you get a phone call that sets you off sailing. And if you are not, if you haven't trained yourself to really take a deep breath and say, okay, center yourself, what is happening here and how am I going to react to this situation, then the rest of your day is blown. I mean, now you're snapping at your
100%.
coworkers, you're yelling at your kids,
Right. Right. Yeah. It just kind of offset an entire cycle and kind of ruin your day, and oftentimes we kind of allow ourselves to go into these like negative downward spirals. But it's actually quite easy once you see that and understand that, to kind of snap yourself out of it. I mean, no one's perfect. We have good days and bad days. That's natural. But how we react to those situations, like you said, that's, completely our choice.
Right. It is completely our choice. And I know that I've had some coaching clients in the past that I feel like we're setting ourselves up, we end our session and they're on a high, of how they are going to, react for the next of the week before we meet again. And then the thing that I hear is all of the horrible things that happened to them that week. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about the victories, because I think so much people that do have a negative mindset, a lot of times don't realize that they do. You have to help them become self-aware. And I know that one of the things that you are contemplating is your own podcast show. Is that right?
Yeah, I definitely would love to spread knowledge, and kind of bring more understanding to people, on how to not really motivate themselves. I feel like, with Instagram and everything else, the social media, whether it's like TV programs or, talk shows, whatever it is, it's always aimed so much towards like self-motivation.
Right.
I almost think at the core of that, if we wake up and just know our true purpose, not that we don't need motivation, but it's like we can keep ourselves going, and of course, once in a while, we're all human beings. Nobody's perfect. So we do need a push, but we're not going to revert back to that negative mindset like right away. So the path to self-realization is really digging deep and finding the issues and being brave enough to go back in your past and really figure out like, hey, what went wrong there? So if you have an often negative reaction, or you have the same similar fights with different people in your life, instead of essentially blaming the other person or blaming yourself, you're looking at it from a non-judgmental perspective and
Right.
say, there's some healing that I need to do in that area. Why did why do these things really trigger me? No matter who's saying it, these things, ABC, it always triggers me. Why? Right? So
Right.
a part of self-realization is be kind enough and love yourself enough and be brave enough to look back in your past and say, this is why, all these things are triggering me today. And it's time for me to let those baggage go.
Right. Yeah, because if we don't, I think we all can be button pushers of other people when we're
Mm-hmm.
in that, I guess, feeling less of ourselves or not feeling as worthy as
100%.
we should. We tend to
Mm-hmm.
want to push someone else's buttons to make them be where we are.
Right.
And
Right. You
really,
kind
it's
of
just
like
a
look for
pattern
the
of destruction.
reaction.
Right.
Right. I think definitely as human beings, we do operate off of like whether or not I would say like somebody's spiritually aware, as almost like animals in a way. Our instinct is to pick up other people's energies, and often if we're not so happy with ourselves, you look for almost like you want to trigger similar reactions to other people. So within and without, right? So what you're manifesting in your mind and heart, that's what you're trying to essentially bring the vibrations around you to the same frequencies. And sometimes you're just kind of like a person can very much go in a room and be like a dark hole of
Right.
negative energies. So,
And you
and
know
nobody
what?
wants to be around that. So
And you know what, Sunshine? I can feel that a lot of times. Like I travel
right.
quite a bit, and I can be in an
Mm-hmm.
airplane, and if the person sitting
Right.
next to me is depressed or they're just putting off really bad
Mm-hmm.
energy for whatever's going on with them, or
Right.
they're troubled, like I can pick that
Mm-hmm.
up. I can feel that without even
Right.
speaking to them. And I think sometimes, oh
Right.
my gosh, like where is that coming from? I don't want to pick that up. And so
Right.
a lot of times I'll get off the plane and I'll have to do this whole mind cleanse with myself, to
Right.
get
And which
that
is
negative
good.
energy off
Yeah.
of me.
Sure. And that's very, very good that, you have that awareness, because I think for most people, they don't realize that we're, in the world absorbing other people's energies. And so they go through life and they're like, well, they pick up the negativity of others.
Hmm.
And that in terms, essentially down the road, if you don't, like you said, cleanse your mind and your aura of this constant, bombarding of negativity,
Right.
it will result in depression for no reason. Next thing you know, you're on prescriptions of Prozac or lithium, whatever,
Right.
for almost no reason. And your psychiatrist can't tell you why, right? And I
Right.
think that it's a very important thing for us to realize, hey, what are the emotions that are mine,
Right.
and what am I picking up from
Exactly.
others? So that's a wonderful thing for you to, the ability for you to have.
Right. Yeah. And I have a girlfriend that is really, I mean, she calls herself an intuitive spiritual leader because she really
That's wonderful.
extremely in touch with that. I mean, she can pick up things from
Hmm.
people and literally write them down and then
Right.
ask them a question and
Hmm.
they answer honestly. It's what she already had written
Hmm.
down about them. It's incredible. It's
Right. Right.
literally
Right.
incredible because I'm constantly around her going, "Are
That's
you
very
getting
interesting.
anything?" I'm like,
Right.
"Charlotte, are you getting anything from me?"
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like she's an empath.
She
And
is.
it's such a gift. It's a gift, but it's important for empathic people to learn to transmute negativity into positivity, and they're
Right.
constantly having to do that. And which is something that I'm currently struggling with on my journey, where I like to channel versus absorb. So that's
Right.
very interesting. Yeah.
Oh gosh. I mean, I could just talk to you forever. So tell us a little bit. I know everyone is going to want to because you're just a ball of really positive light and energy. And I love that about you. Tell everybody where we can follow and find you so we can make sure when your podcast comes out or your book or whatever you're working on,
Yeah.
that we are the first to be aware.
Sure. So my Instagram is Captain Sunny. Actually, Captain S Sunny, 2 S's, and then UNNY. So I'm pretty much, I don't really have Twitter or anything. I need to really establish myself on social media here, but my Instagram is my go-to.
Captains, and that's 2 S's. So Captains Sunny.
Yeah. Yes.
Got,
Yes.
got
Captain,
it.
2 S's, UNNY.
Excellent. I appreciate you so much, Sunshine. I
Thank
really,
you so much.
really, really do. Guys, make sure you go and follow Sunshine, because she is someone, and like I always tell you guys, my listeners, I love you so much. And you look at me sometimes for inspiration and encouragement, as well as education and business tips, emotional, spiritually, financially. It's wonderful. If you're on Instagram and you're not following someone that does not help you grow or add value to what you're going through, unfollow, just unfollow, because it is a complete waste of time. You need to be following people on these social medias that are not just trying to sell you skincare or some type of product, that are really encouraging you and showing you how to live your best life. So, Sunshine, thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you so much for having me.
I really, really do. And guys, before we jump off, remember, please jump back over to iTunes, anywhere you listen to your podcast. And I would be so grateful if you gave me a 5-star review. Leave me just a little comment under reviews on how this show helped you and how just Real Girl Talk is helping to add value in your life. And until next week, have a blessed and a wonderful